Take your time. Lovely. So hi, Rachel Thomas, I'm sleep consultant, and thanks so much for having me. Really, really pleased to get a chance to speak to you guys today. I was just saying, really, my passion comes from sleep deprivation, because I know how difficult it already is when you have a newborn, and the sleep deprivation on top of it can be really hard. And one of the things I'm always surprised with is we learn so much about birth and about practicing and about looking after a baby, but actually when it comes to sleep, it's kind of like a bit of a just see how it goes. And that was one thing I was really passionate about, is where what can we do? And surely there's some practical things we can help with, and what's to be expected, and what can we do really at those times. If there is anything that you would like to know, like really specific, we can ask some questions at the end, and you can let me know if I haven't covered it. But I'll just cover kind of some main topics, if that sounds okay. Lovely. So the first thing I suppose that's really useful to talk about is safety. No matter what courses you do preparing for birth, they'll usually talk about safety and sleep. So I won't go over too much, but one really useful thing is if you connect to it. So if you're on Instagram or even Google, the Lullaby Trust is brilliant. So look up there if you have any questions about anything related to sleep and newborns, even products. Like sometimes people say, oh, well, I saw it online, or my friend recommended it. Just Google Lullaby Trust and what they think about that, because that's the best thing. And that way then you're not going by any sort of Stacey Solomon recommended this, or so and so on Instagram. You're really going by evidence and what's the safest. So that's a good place to start. Next thing then really is thinking about the first step. So when you're bringing baby home, that 4th trimester. And it's definitely true, that bit that people say about you can't spoil a baby. So sleep is no different. And I'm definitely not one of those people to say, with sleep, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and you need to be really harsh, and you need to be really putting the baby down and doing this. Actually, just go with the flow and look after yourself and look after the baby, because it's a big adjustment for everyone. And that's one of the big things with sleep, is that pressure. People put so much pressure. What am I doing? Is this normal? Is it not? Am I being the best mother? There's so much of that. So really look after yourself and just be kind. When it comes then to starting to, so what will be usually what's happening is the baby will be used to sleeping during the day and waking at night, because that's what happens when the little baby is in your tummy. You'll be more active, so you'll be rocking the baby when you're walking around in your tummy. And then when it comes to nighttime, the baby will start kicking usually at nighttime, and it'll be a bit more active. So sometimes that happens too when you bring the newborn home, is it might be a little bit more active at night and a little bit more sleepy during the day. One of the things we talk about is adjusting, so helping the baby adjust. And you can imagine it's a big change when it's been in the lovely and nice environment of the womb to come out then to this cold, loud world. So we just talk about a lot about skin to skin. So really important, that touch, that using a sling if you need to, carrying, whether you're breastfeeding or not, just really important, that hugging and getting kind of close and engaging. One of the things that's really good to think about is that how you're talking and presenting yourself during the day versus at night. So you're trying to give some clues to the baby about daytime and nighttime. So when you're changing or feeding the baby during the day, it can be quite animated, jovial, kind of moving around. When you're changing the baby at nighttime, a bit more subdued. You don't need to be talking, making a lot of facial expressions, just quite quiet. And you're just trying to get the baby used to, this is quiet time now, this is nighttime, and during the day it's more bubbly and we're having fun. The other thing that's really important, that first few weeks as well, is trying for you to get settled and you to get used to, because it's a big role and important about that. You can use a sling if you need it, because sometimes people find they're carrying the baby all the time. So a sling is really useful, just to give you, so you can make yourself a cup of tea, or that hands free. When we talk about sleeping then at nighttime and daytime, what we usually think about with the newborn is they actually sleep quite a bit and quite regularly. If they're not, then it's really important to start thinking about, how do you know when they are tired, and looking at them to see. So cues that we know babies are tired. There's some really obvious ones like yawning. But actually there's some less obvious ones, like sometimes they get little red on their eyebrows, red underneath on their little eyes. Sometimes they're staring as well, so they might just look a little bit more quiet, and you're kind of going over to them, they might kind of stare past you or stare through you. So that's when you know they're starting to get tired. For little newborns, usually they nap, the maximum time awake is about 60 to 90 minutes. So actually, if your newborn's awake for 2 or 3 hours, really you should be trying to see if you can support them to have a little nap, because that's important for them to have regular naps, because they can get overtired and that can make them a bit cranky and grumpy too. Some little ones, I usually say settle in for the first few weeks. Don't be trying to change anything or adjust too much. But one of the things is if the newborn is sleeping a lot during the day. Now, your midwife or health visitor will have had a chat with you about if you need to wake them for feeding. So if their weight is a little underweight and you need to be feeding them a bit more regularly, your midwife or health visitor will say, keep an eye, you need to be waking them to feed them. If the health visitor isn't saying that, or your midwife isn't saying that, then I would usually suggest after 2 hours in the day to try and wake them up, because otherwise they might get a big chunk of sleep during the day and then they'll be up a bit more at night. So I know that sounds a bit kind of against the grain, waking a little bit sleeping baby up. But if the health visitor has said you don't need to wake them up for feeding, then I would say wake up after 2 hours, because that otherwise they'll have a big chunk of sleep during the day and they won't have it at night. The other thing that's really useful in that first fourth trimester, so when you've brought the baby home, is using white noise, because as you can imagine in the womb, it's that lovely kind of shushing background noise and really dull. So usually I'd suggest using white noise, and you can buy them, they're little machines or little toys have them. But the big thing is they have to be non-looping. So that means not, like they're on for 10 minutes and then they switch off, or they're on for 20 minutes and they switch off. With white noise, it needs to be continuous. So if you're going to use it, just leave it on. Or if you're not going to use it, don't have it on. There's no point having it kind of on and off, because even that sort of tiny little bit of flicking on and off can wake them up. So that's something just to think about. The other thing then to think about in general with sleep, so some sorts of things, not for now, but for later on, are about hormones. So the sleepy hormone is called melatonin, and that's the one that helps us to sleep. And light is really important. We need to have light during the day, but actually light can really stimulate cortisol, so that can wake us up. So if you are using a night light or a light, because sometimes at night, you need a light to change their nappy or to feed them, try and use a red light or an orange light, because blue lights or white lights actually wake up the baby and wake us up. And even if the baby has their little eyelids closed, actually they can still stimulate cortisol, which wakes them up. So this is really important, because sometimes you might be like, well, I had the TV on, or you might have your phone. A lot of people, while they're breastfeeding, they might have their phone and they'd be kind of like trying to hold it. That's really important to try and keep those kind of lights, the white and the blue, away from the baby, and good for you as well, because actually melatonin is in our breast milk as well. So that's so when we're feeding in the night, the melatonin is higher. So if you're watching a lot of screens and you're really alert and awake, that can kind of alert the little baby as well. So that's something to think about. In terms then of a bath, so this is another question loads of people ask me about the newborns. Do you have to give them a bath every single night as part of a routine, bedtime routine? And the answer is definitely not. The NHS, they'll give you some guidelines about actually bathing. It doesn't have to be every single night, and actually products especially. Everyone thinks, you have to have the super duper bath products that you've bought. They don't need it, and actually just keep it as simple as you can. So that's something to remember as well about a bath. They don't need a bath every single night. So take that pressure off yourself as well. With newborns and little young ones, so one of the biggest questions that comes up a lot as well is about contact naps. So contact naps is when the little one is sleeping on you. So what I usually say is, if you're happy with that and that's okay for you and you're safe doing it and you want to keep doing that, then that's fine. But lots of mums say to me, actually, I'm exhausted and the little one's fallen asleep on me and I can't move. And actually, a lot of people get a bit scared as well, because if you do fall asleep, there's a real risk of sudden infant death syndrome, because people, you know, they're on a couch or they're, so lots of people say to me, actually, I feel really like it's stressing me out. Can you help with that? So one of the things we talk about a lot is about trying to transfer them then from you. So there's no harm, you can still feed them to sleep, feeding on you, but then we want to try and move them to a Moses basket or a next to me, so you can have a bit of space and you can sleep. So what I usually suggest is, when they're on you, what you do is, first of all, you can check to see if they're in a deep sleep or not so deep sleep. So how you do that is little reflex. You put your baby finger in their open palm. If a baby is in a deep sleep, they won't put their fingers around you. If they are in a deep sleep, their fingers will stay open, and that's a good time to transfer them. So that's what I usually suggest, is check that first, that reflex, put your finger in their little palm. If they go like that, they're still alert. There's no point transferring them. You're just going to wake them and you'll stress yourself out. So try that first. When you know then they're in a deep sleep, what you do is, so as much kind of support around their body as possible, bringing them over to the cot or the basket. And what a lot of us do is we bring them out and then we put them down. And actually what that does is it gives them a bit of a startle reflex. So you'll see them doing that in the hospital as one of the checks, and they'll check if the baby has a startle reflex, and that's their little arms go back and they get a bit of a fright and a jump. When we're transferring them, this happens loads, and loads of people then get really frustrated because they've woken the baby up and now they're like, oh no, back again. So to help with that, try and keep their little arms in when you're transferring them across. Keep them close to you as much as possible, and try and go down as close to the basket rather than bringing them out. I know it's a bit hard to see on the video, but I hope that makes sense. Next thing then is, when you're transferring them into the cot, is do feet first, or some people do sideways and then roll on their back. And that's one of the other safe sleeping guidelines, is that babies have to be put to sleep on their back. So I hope, was that clear enough, or do you want me to go through that again? Great, lovely. And that's one of the things that people find really helpful. And even when I'm doing the newborn workshop, that's one of the tips that people come back and say, oh, do you know what, that was really helpful, because if you get, people call it like a nap trap, you know, because you're literally like, I can't move, I can't get to my phone, I can't get to food or drink. So try that if you can. Once you place them down, then what sometimes people find helpful as well is put your palm on their tummy, and you can give them a gentle little rock just for a couple of seconds. Or people like to put their hand on their leg and just a little rock. And again, that just eases them into, instead of going from lovely warm you to nothing, they're getting nice and cozy, and you're just kind of settling them into the cot. So that's one of the things that works really well. Trying to think now what else would be helpful. One of the other things then that comes up a lot is about moving the baby into their own room. And I know that probably seems ages away now at the moment. And what's recommended usually is once a baby is 6 months, they can be in their own room. Up to 6 months, they're meant to be within eye shot of you, really. So you should be able to see them for their naps and for bedtime. So in the room with you. Again, with moving into their own room, there's no pressure. Move them if you want to, keep them in longer if you want to. Sometimes houses, like, you mightn't have a space to move them into, or they might be the plan that they're going to stay in the room with you, and that's fine. If you are going to move them, what I suggest usually is during the day, spending a little bit of time. So even if you're like doing the laundry or something in the new room, you could be pottering away and you just place them in the cot, and they're just sitting in there. So it's not scary. It's nothing like this is this big cot. You're just sitting in there and you're having fun. The other thing that's really helpful is if they are wearing a sleeping bag to sleep in their next to me or the Moses basket at that point, try and use one that's already worn, so it smells of them, it's familiar. And another thing that people find really helpful is the sheet. So this sounds a bit funny now, but the fitted sheet of the new cot. sometimes people find it helpful if, as a mum, you have that around you, or if you wear it for like a day, so it kind of smells of you. Or some people would get a worn t-shirt from mum and put it under the fitted sheet. And again, that just makes the cot smell like mum, so it's not scary, or it's not like this brand new space that's suddenly like a fresh sheet, a fresh mattress. It all looks different. So those kind of things help to make it a bit more comfortable. Cot mobiles then, so that's something that people aren't really aware of. So, you know, cot mobiles that you put on the side and they have like music and singing and dancing, they're not really recommended safety wise, just because if they fall in, and also they can be quite alerting and stimulating. And bumpers as well. So think of cot bumpers, they go around the cot and make it safe, and netting, they're not recommended either. And they're two kind of the big things that come up a lot that people aren't aware really that they aren't recommended. I know it's been loads of information there, so I hope that's been helpful. But would it be okay if we just have some questions now, if there was anything or anything, Sinead, you think even maybe other mums would like to know that we haven't talked about, or that would be helpful?
Yeah, Fiore, do you have any questions? No? Okay, if you think of anything, just jump in, okay? If you want to turn your camera on, you can as well. It's oh, I think you know, sorry, you said you used Zoom before. Questions. What is like a normal amount of sleep for a newborn?
So yeah, this is one of the ones that comes up a lot, and always I say to people now, don't compare. So don't compare yourself to your best friend or your sister, because they'll say, you know, my little one naps here, naps there. It can be anything really from 18 to 23 hours. So it's huge, you know, it can be a huge amount. But actually the biggest thing is regular sleep, regular and often, especially with the little newborns. So 60 to 90 minutes, if you can think about that, rather than, you know, have they slept 4 hours, have they slept 5 hours, trying to think about, are they getting regular and often sleep? Because that's one of the things that a lot of us don't know actually. And one of the big myths is, if people think that if babies sleep too much, then they'll be awake more in the night. But actually we need regular and often sleep, and that'll help us sleep better in the night. And that's something that a lot of I suppose mother-in-laws, to paint them now with a bad brush, but that's a lot of advice that people often tell me that they get is, people have said to them, oh, they're sleeping too much in the day, you need to be, you know, actually leaving them longer awake. But actually, especially for newborns, every 60 to 90 minutes they do need to be having a little nap and having a rest. Because one of the things that I think is really interesting is with our hormones, have you ever been so tired that you almost feel a bit hyper, like you almost feel a bit like, actually I don't need sleep, I feel great now, you know? And the same happens to babies. So they think it's an evolutionary thing, that you're trying to sleep when you want, but then you think, oh, I can't sleep, so there must be danger, or there must be something so your hormones are going, you know, like a shot of coffee almost. And that's what happens with babies too. So they almost go like from, I need to sleep, and then suddenly they get like, okay, I can't have sleep, let's stay awake. And so often that happens, that people will say, well, they seem like full of beans now, but that might be that kind of wake window, that important time. So that's something just to bear in mind, because that's when then they get grouchy and they're harder to get to sleep. So it'd be like us if we had like a large coffee and then someone said, oh, have a little sleep, you know, you'd be just wired, you wouldn't be able to. So that's something that's quite useful to think about, is little and often really, rather than sort of spending big chunks of time awake, because that's too much for them, you know, they're only small and it's a lot of stimulation.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, to think about that evolutionary thing. I suppose it makes sense.
It makes
sense. Yeah,
I know people who say, oh, I only need 4 hours sleep, and I think you're just running on cortisol. Like, I don't think that's true.
And I suppose it makes sense, because I know the feeling, like, you know, you suddenly, you know, when you're getting up, like if you were getting up for a flight when you were younger or anything like that, you know, you'd almost feel like, I feel great, I don't need the sleep actually. So
yeah, and it catches up with you, doesn't it, though?
It does definitely.
Yeah.
I suppose the other thing that's quite useful, I suppose, for people to know is about pandas as well. So there's a meeting in Cardiff for the postnatal depression. They meet in, is it Roth or Cave?
Okay.
In the table, so that's useful to know as well. They meet monthly, so if anyone needs that kind of extra, I suppose, peer support, catching up with moms who are having a tough time, that'd be a useful place to signpost to.
That's good. And that was called Pandas.
Pandas, yeah. I think
Okay.
it's standing for it's postnatal and depression, mental health, but it's called Cardiff Pandas. And they meet monthly in the table, it's called. You might have heard of it. It's over there around Roth.
Okay, I'll look that up.
But that's that might be just, again, it's a bit of peer support if people wanted just for the catch up. It's for mums and dads, but I think it's mostly mums that go.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. And what about mums sleeping? I know I hear a lot of like sleep when the baby sleeps, and I'm not sure if that's always practical for people, but is that the recommendation you go by?
Yeah, I think that's one of those sort of people often find that really difficult because, and I think especially because we just talked about, I suppose, the cortisol and the stress. Often you're so stressed, and stress can be good and bad, but like it's that alert, and you're so like, this is such a big thing, you're brought home the new baby, that often moms find it really hard to sleep actually when the baby's sleeping, because they want to do the laundry, or they want to even just make food, or they want to. But if you can, it is really good to start off that sleep when the baby sleeps at the start, because you're not going to get your regular sleep at night. And that's one of the big things really with sleep, and with us as adults, we repair and we need that restoring sleep at night time, but actually we're not going to get it when you have that waking up regularly with the baby. So that's why we need to kind of make up for it during the day. So sleep when you can. It's easier said than done, and it's definitely one of the big things that mums say looking back. Oh, I wish I did sleep when the baby slept, but I had visitors, or I wanted to do this, or I want to do that. So that's a big thing if you can. Screen time, we mentioned there when I was talking about the light and the cortisol, but that's a big thing for mums as well, because especially when you're waking in the night, it seems so natural to look on your phone or to be googling things a lot of the time. We're like, oh, what's normal and what am I meant to be doing? But if you can, like, try your best to stay away from screens and TVs in the evening and night time, because as I was saying, actually that impacts on your hormones as well, and your alerting, and that's a good way to think about looking after yourself, because you're trying to guide the baby, and even your energy levels. If you're quite, I feel quite hyper in the night and quite alert, actually it's really good to be more relaxing and giving off sort of a relaxing feeling towards the baby. I think that's really, really helpful for them as well. And then all the usual, like we know caffeine is a stimulant, and most of the time breastfeeding moms aren't on caffeine anyway, because if they're breastfeeding. But just stuff like that, it's useful to think about, as well as looking after your own health and what you can do, making sure you're drinking enough and eating good food, because often people get just run ragged at that time, so that's important.
Super important. Fiora, is there anything you'd like to ask before we wrap up? Can you say it a little bit louder, love? Can you say that again? Fiora, did you have a question? Okay, no worries. Well, this meeting is recorded, and I'll share that with all the mums as well. So if you want to watch it back, but you're due very soon, aren't you? Your baby's coming very soon. Did you know much about sleep for babies before this meeting? Oh, it's breaking up for me. Can you say that again? Sorry. Oh, you did. Okay. Okay, great. Well, that's handy. If you do think of any questions, I can always email Rachel, okay? Okay, great. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us, Rachel? Or is that everything?
No, that's lovely. There is a bit of newborn information on Instagram if people are on that at Sleep Like a Baby ZZZ, or on the website as well. I have a couple of videos if that's easier to understand. It's sleeplikeababy.info, so if that's helpful for people as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, maybe we can try and arrange an in-person session. Maybe we'll have more take up for that and maybe come to
Yeah,
Planned Parenthood.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful. There was so much information. I just learned like loads.
Yeah, sorry, I hope it wasn't too much now.
No,
I'm
you paced it.
really passionate about it, so I'm a bit like,
Yeah,
you know,
I just didn't. I never thought there was so much to know about sleep. It's great. It's really interesting and really helpful for me as well, because obviously I'm supporting the mums and visiting and things, so just to know that, like the padding in the cot and things like that. I knew that wasn't always recommended, but I wasn't sure why. And and the what's that called? The mobiles. I always thought that was quite strange, because you just get babies going like this, and it's really like keeps them awake.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, because I always thought like, oh, it's fine, but it's probably not ideal. But then I thought, oh, well, if they're used to it, then it isn't. But then, no, Lullaby Trust says nothing above or nothing kind of dangling or anything, which makes sense. And I know like people do say, you know, little 6-month-olds would be nearly trying to pull themselves, you know, or pulling it in on top of them. And you kind of are like, it makes sense, because sure, they're little rascals at that stage and trying to roll over. And
yeah. Oh, I think we've just, when it comes to baby things, we've just added so much unnecessary stuff, haven't we? Just
absolutely.
The industry of like selling things to moms.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things people say, you know, oh, the cot, oh, it looks so bare. Oh, I feel terrible. It looks so bare. Or it looks, you know, people want to put cushions in or duvet, and you're like, no, actually, like they don't need all those things, and it's safer without. But it is. There's something about us that's like, oh, I feel terrible. Like it looks terrible, you know. But actually, like it's just safer and it works.
Yeah, exactly. I like Montessori, that kind of style. It's very clean and it's very practical. Yes. And I think more people are kind of going towards that stuff now, aren't they? So that's handy.
Well, yeah, and especially like that's one of the things, the mattress, you know, the low mattresses, the low beds, like they're brilliant, because you just think actually like otherwise the bed gets so complicated. That later 2-year-old, 3-year-old, you know, and the low floor beds are brilliant. So it's lovely.
Yeah. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Share that with everybody, and we'll definitely arrange to have another session with you, and maybe when we have a few more in person, so people are used to coming out, and then we can have more of a guaranteed numbers. But yeah, I'll stop.